I feel nauseous, believe me. Never had a lot of shit come easy. Had to work hard, struggle just to be me. Had to rise up just so they could see me. Did what I had to do just to feed me. And what was
This is a work in progress, and this is the very first live podcast I have done, period. Everything else has been pre-recorded. It's been amazing, so I can go in there and square up all the mistakes I make, and nobody has to deal with that. But I'm on the hook right now, and I've got a couple folks with me. We're going to bring them in a sec. The focus of this conversation is going to be everything to do with hybrid athletes and hybrid competitions. And so I brought in, as you kind of saw in the intro, Tara Jackson and Kevin Gregory. I'm sorry, I'm looking for this little button I need to push to get comments up. So there we go. So now in the event somebody has comments, they're able to do it. We'll see it, and so on and so forth. So let me go ahead and bring these guys in. And I just got to bring Kevin in. Let's put him on there. Boom. Look, there he is. Speak up so I can hear that you're alive, buddy.
Hello, Richard. Hello, Tara.
What's up? Let me clean you up a little bit. I can create a little brightness here. There we go. Look at that. Look at that. So, thanks, guys, for showing up for this. As I suggested, I have never done a live broadcast. I intend to do one every week. That's my new deal. I'm going at least live on YouTube every week, right about now, Thursday, 1:30 Central Time. And so I am assuming that folks that watch this, if anybody's even prepared to see this because it's new, I'm not going to be upset if I don't get any followers showing up because they don't know. But we're going to call this the beta, or the British call it the beta. This is the beta show. Anyway, as I told Tara earlier, an hour ago when she got on, that we have no agenda. You guys are both very invested in the concept of hybrid specific competitions. I left it like that because there are other factions beyond just High Rocks. There's DecaFit, and every time you turn around, there's a new breed of hybrid type of competitions. And I have some thoughts about that, and I'm sure you do as well. So let's just start by introducing Tara first. Tara, explain who you are, what you do, and why you do it.
So I'm a personal trainer out of Wilmington, North Carolina, and I'm the 2022 DECA Fit World Champion and DECA Strong World Champion.
So Kevin and I go way back. Once upon a time, Kevin and I worked together. I coached him as he was in putting a square peg in a round hole, trying to do really long events with a really big body, you know? And I lobbied often to him to focus on shorter distance, high intensity events. And lo and behold, they created one for him. Actually, two, right?
Yeah. So until then, there was only Spartan sprints and stadiums, which
Right.
I'd done successfully for a couple of years, but not that top tier where I was competing to win them. But I was having a lot more fun with ultras, so I wanted to run farther, longer, not get hurt, and the appeal of climbing that Spartan mountain towards the Ultra Beast and the 24-hour Ultra Beast and all that stuff was a lot of fun. And working with Richard, I've ended up working up to 7th in the world at the Iceland 24-hour World Championships, and I got a silver bib at World's Toughest Mudder. So those were my two ultra biggest feats. So
I recall that we took you from an average of about 20 miles a week of running up to 100 miles of running a week, over 200 pounds. Remember that?
We broke 100 a couple times. That 1 month was probably double what I'd averaged in any month leading up to it. So a lot of miles.
Well, the good news is you were able to do it without injury. And this obviously is the hurdle for most people, is their limitation on their volume is related to poor function, and they end up hurting themselves before they get to the holy grail of, serious volume. But he was a good experiment to see whether we could make that happen. But he was a good student. He paid attention to the details and ended up getting to actually, we probably got you down to about as light as you've ever been in your adult life, probably, huh?
Yeah, aside from cutting weight in high school wrestling, I haven't been under 200 pounds, and even with 100-mile weeks, I was still over 200 pounds. So I've given up on thinking that lighter is faster. It's just not going to happen. So I was especially frail too.
Well, I hate to break it to you,
trying,
but lighter is faster. Unfortunately,
I, I agree, but the way I went about going lighter was not particularly faster.
no. So I'm going to circle back to what you said, Terry, because I'm curious about this. You had made a comment about the course. You didn't love the courses in High Rocks because of the turns, and it didn't work in your favor because your strength is your running ability.
Yeah, well, the turns and there was overcrowded people, so you couldn't open up. Like the straightaways were probably like 60 meters. So by the time you open up your stride, you hit like a 90-degree turn. So it's really a disadvantage for people who like their strength. Obviously the stations don't really change that much unless like the sleds are pushing fast or slow that day. So for me, I don't like unpredictability. Like that's one good thing I guess that I've found with DECA is like most of the core going like Puerto Rico are like very, very similar, if not almost identical. So you know exactly what to expect. Like I would compare like High Rocks to be like, oh, well, I signed up to run the 5K, but today I'm actually going to run the 3K steeple. I didn't know that I was going to have to do all this today. Like it's like I trained for something, and then there's like this unforeseen, which some people might think, oh, running 38 turns is not that big of a deal, but when you're trying to run like 6 flat pace, like it is. So when you're, I don't know, it's not a big deal when you're jogging, but when you're trying to like run at faster speeds, it's a huge deal, and it makes a big difference. I think just my run between Manchester and New York was like 3 minutes slower, and I ran an extra lap in Manchester, so it was slower with an extra lap. So
that extra lap will get you every time.
Say what?
So that extra lap will get you every time.
Yeah, I mean, I was having so much fun running. I guess I just decided I wanted to run an extra.
Look, you're not the only one. I know I have clients that have made that same mistake. And
that's the I've ever done is at World Championships, but it was because the screen told me I had an extra lap, and then I was running with another girl that I guess her screen was messed up too. There was a lot of screen weird stuff going on at World Championships, so I've learned my lesson that I should just count my laps myself.
So, Kevin, among the two reigning event producers, DECA, Spartan, and High Rocks, what do you prefer?
DECA right now. I've done High Rocks. I think I've run 4 pro waves. But my experience with High Rocks has not been what it could be, because every time I've run a High Rocks, it just happened to be a weekend I was available. And the times I've trained for High Rocks, the dates or the venues got changed last minute. And I just got so frustrated with build, don't race. Build, don't race. So I just wrote it off. And then DECA came around. I'm like, all right, these races are happening. I'm just going to do these. And I know that I could do decent in High Rocks. I'm not saying I'm elite 15 or anything without a hell of a lot of work, but there's a lot more running in that. And I need to put a lot more time into the 5-mile 8K distance versus DECA right now. My strengths are the strong in the mile because they're shorter, and even more so the relays, because I could just find someone that's fast like Tara and have her do all the runs, and then I just do what I'm good at. And that's been my strengths for DECA so far. I enjoy the fit though. I'm going to do the fit in New Jersey this weekend and try to PR.
Well, it's unique. The business model that Spartan put together for DECA whatever, is intelligent in that they're giving club owners an opportunity to earn as they host these events, and takes the burden off them of actually having to produce and facilitate the events. And so they go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's funny that Hyrux has a similar thing called the PFT, but so you have to pay to be an affiliate, but they don't charge anybody to do the PFT, even though it's an event. So if they just charge for that, like they charge for the strong and the mile, I think it'd be more of an incentive for gyms to become affiliates. But there's no real incentive for a gym to become a Hyrux affiliate because, I mean, no offense, nobody knows what Hyrux is. So it's not like using CrossFit where it's like, oh, I'm going to look for a CrossFit gym when I move to Wilmington. Like, no, they're not going to, people aren't looking for Hyrux specific gyms. So they need something to incentivize the gyms to actually become an affiliate. That's not just an additional cost.
I don't know much about the politics. I have obviously a relationship with Hunter, and we've discussed Hyrux and the politics of Hyrux on many occasions. It's not always been the rosiest picture, but I like the event. And I get what you're saying. The venues being a little different sometimes, and a lot of turns because they're trying to accommodate the distance indoors. It makes it very difficult. But the truth of the matter is that everybody's suffering the same consequence. It's not like, you want to go fast, and it's a pain in the ass to have to make those turns. But there's people trying to go fast, and they got to make those turns too. So it's evened up really for the most part.
It wouldn't be such a big issue if your qualification didn't rely on your time. So I'm mad because my time is not going to get me into all the majors, even though I probably would have ran a time that would have got me into, if I would have ran a 103, I could have ran any major probably the rest of the year. But because I ran a 107, I'm probably going to get knocked from the Elite 15 rankings. So that time does matter, even though, yes, it doesn't matter because everybody's enduring the same kind of situation. But then when you're trying to go off time, like, it makes a huge difference.
Right. Well, it's new. All of this is new for the most part. To be honest with you, in 5 years, none of this might be here for all we know. And I've learned to trust but verify. I just find that I remember people telling me early on that OCR isn't gonna be here down the road. I used to try to convince my triathlon friends and folks that are in the running game to participate in OCR, and they looked at me like I was crazy. It's like, no, what, playing in the mud, that's not going to be here. So, that's going to go away. And honestly, it's not gone away, but my perspective is it's not what it used to be. And I think that DECA has been pretty much keeping the thing together. It's keeping people engaged with the Spartan brand, and that's helping them. Because had they not done that, I think just choice between doing an OCR event or going to a Hyrux event, they would have weaned off a lot of the population from the sport, and it could have been a problem. But as it turns out now, there is no such thing as a weekend without an event, almost anywhere in the world. And
I think smart too, because when I was a Hyrux ambassador or whatever, I had told them that they need to make the event more accessible. Like, if it's a business, right? Like, you have an event that normal people can't really participate in. And they say, oh, that's what relays are for, that's what teams are for. But people like to participate in individual events. And I have clients that are in their 70s that can do the DECA Strong. And so I can bring that to my gym, and I know that 100% of people can probably participate. You cannot participate in a Hyrux without training. I mean, you have to have 5 miles is a lot of miles. And then plus the weights are longer and heavier, so you're creating a gap that you could be making money off of, but they just refuse to, make a shorter event. That
Well, yeah. Honestly, to be honest with you, I like high rocks because of the difficulty. It definitely separates the wheat from the chaff. You cannot do well in a high rocks event unless you throw down some pretty significant training preparation.
well,
Where
I'm talking about from a business standpoint.
No, you're right.
Like
Absolutely, yeah,
you don't
sure.
care who participates. Like you
Right.
want
Right.
mass participation, so you make it more accessible for people. But as an athletic endeavor, yeah, high rocks is a lot more impressive. It takes a lot more training. So from an athletic perspective, yes, it's more impressive. But I just don't think that most people would be lured into doing it like that aren't already incredibly fit.
Well, again, you're right. From a business perspective, you're absolutely on point. But for me, I mean, I'm a fly on the wall. I'm not about to go out there and try. You know, you have clients that are 70 years old that are doing this kind of thing. I ain't doing it. I'm 70 years old. I'm not doing it. But from my perspective, because I work with athletes, you know, trying to bring them to a much greater performance is what I'm all about. I don't care what it is you're trying to do. Tell me what you're trying to do and let's see if we can get you there, right? That's what I do. And so this was just another game to engage me. Unfortunately, there's just too many games and people can't see me because they're too busy racing, which is kind of odd, right?
Well, it's funny. So, I mean, way back when we met, I came on one of your clinics and got a lot of value. And I was like, Richard, I want to train with you. I want you to teach me how to get better and I want to be more competitive. And you were like, no, you race too much. I can't work with you. You want to run a stadium today, an ultra tomorrow, and next week we're doing a super, 24 hours the next day, and you don't have any weekends open. And it took me 6 months of like, all right, let me do this. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to pick one thing to focus on. And then I came to another clinic and we revisited it and really saw the fruits of my labor by specializing. But now I think with hybrid, it's not I mean, I'm not trying to do ultras anymore, but I'm trying to do deck of this, and then in a couple months do a high rocks, and then there's all these other brands like popping up these one-off events that I'm like, oh, my fitness might be good for this specific thing, like what just happened, the Rally in the Valley thing. I wasn't looking at that, but watching it, I'm like, okay, I think my skill set would fit well. Or the Great Games was kind of a conglomerate of everything, but now Conor McGregor is coming out with this new thing, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of right in my skill set too. But like you said, every weekend there's something. So it's like, how do you choose what to do? And I know Tara's dabbled in a few other things and done pretty well, but it's I think, and then the companies just all overlap. Like none of them pay attention to the other one's schedule or their own. There's a lot of people that work in my gym or just friends and stuff that are like, I want to do DecaFit, but I'm chasing the age group series. I'm going to West Virginia. I want to do DecaFit Orlando, but it's Killington. It's the age group championship. And they just overlap all their own stuff and they shoot themselves in the foot because people that would pay for both events can't because it's on the same physical date. And it's the same company. I'm like, you guys don't.
Well, there's no place else to put it. That's the problem. It's like I just said. It used to be, and you know this. What year was it the first time you participated in one of my clinics?
16, maybe 17.
So
I think 16.
It's been a minute. 7 years ago,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
7 years ago, I would put up a clinic, and it would sell out in 24 hours. And I mean, I would have to argue with people to keep them out because I just could not take any more than I took. And that went on for quite a long time. All over the country, we were traveling and doing the things that we do. And just by demand, sell out, everywhere we go. Now there's just no room. I mean, I look at the calendar and say, well, I need to plug in an event somewhere so, I can get some work done. And there's no place to put it. And there'll be conflict. I mean, you and I, Tara, had conversation. Oh, yeah, I'd love to be there, but.
Great. Yeah, you had the thing on Great Games weekend.
Yeah, well, and then before that there was the other Miami, and before that there was Chicago, and before that it's on everybody's calendar, and so there's just no room.
About that, how I've become victim of this like over racing because there's just so much excitement. But really, I know myself, especially like that there are people that are better than me, and the only way that I'm going to beat them is if I specialize and stay focused in the fall. So I'm hoping that distraction distracts them, so that because
go ahead. I'm sorry.
they also put the High Rocks Major in Sweden on the same weekend as DECA World Championships. So I'm hoping I'm hoping maybe a few people go to that, and I'm like, all right.
Well, so again, me being the fly on the wall, I'm not trying to get to these events. I went to one High Rocks event to spectate in Chicago. I got there the night before, showed up in the morning, met with some of my clients that were racing, and after I saw them race, I left. I mean, I was out of Chicago by noon. So, caught a plane, boom, boom, just took, okay, I got to look at this. And I have to tell you, I was a little dismayed. And this is probably going to not bode well for some people that might hear this. But most of the guys and girls that were racing at the elite level ran like shit. I mean, they were running faster than other people, but they were never anywhere near their potential as athletes because of the way they were moving. And because I've got 30 years doing this kind of work, I can't help myself. I see it, I know, I could tell right away, boom, that's a problem. And it could be better. But they're not having an opportunity to take the time to correct the problems or even identify with the fact that there is a problem. And so what's left? What's left is they pound themselves deeper into the ground. Man, I worked 20 hours every week for the past, I'm just hypothesizing. I worked 20 hours leading up to an event per week, and I fell short of my mark. So maybe I need to go 25 hours. Maybe I need to try to lift heavier. You know what I mean? So it's more, less rest, less recovery, harder. That's not the answer. You need to check yourself before you wreck yourself. You got to figure out what it is that you might have been doing that needs a little attention, and then be strong enough upstairs to lay back and make those corrections. And this is what I don't know. I mean, I realize you're in the business of working with athletes and what have you, and coaching them, both of you. But I don't see much change. You go onto social media, all you see is people lifting weights, or everybody's showing you the same lift. They're doing thrusters, or they're doing a heavy deadlift or big squat, kettlebell swing, maybe a little bit of running. They're all doing the same thing, and then they're one-upping each other. I'm going to work harder than him. I'm going to work harder than her. But they're not getting analytical about the processes, which I think is what's lacking. Knowing what you need to change and why. Nobody's taken the time to figure that out. And I had done that for years with people and taken them to the next level over and over and over again because they had the time and inclination to put the energy in to make those corrections. Which, again, I think it's a travesty to me that there's not more of me's out there that take those clinical views and slow things down and make the type of corrections physiologically that need to be approached, rather than just I'm going to race next week, and next week I'm going to work harder than I did this week. It's just I don't know, just me talking.
Yeah, I think with the racing every weekend. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just going to say it's hard to periodize your training if, like you said, you're always racing. So, but we talked a little bit before when, with running, you might run some races with not the expectation of actually racing, but more as I'm going to use this to try a new strategy, or I'm going to use this as a workout. But giving 100% for a race is a lot, mentally, physically, to taper and do everything that you need to do to perform. It's a big effort. So to make big efforts even every month, I think would be excessive. So making that's why it's kind of cool that they have it lined up where the DECA championships are in the winter and the High Rocks are in the spring. So you could kind of use those as your two A races. But then they have the majors, and then they have the qualifiers, and so they don't really give athletes a chance to have a true off season. So you have to be disciplined enough to like do that yourself.
You have to pick your poison. You have to make a decision as to what is important to you. I get the B race mentality where you're going to just go out there and try some new things, not worry about racing, not worry about winning, just really focusing on, trying new things in the race. I get that. I have, as he had suggested to you, that I used to get a new client that would send me a laundry list of events they want to participate in. And then I would get my marker out and I would start crossing them off. No, you're not doing this. No, you're not doing that. No, you're not. No, you're not doing 2 races on the weekend. You're not going to do a super and then do a beast. You're not doing that. We're going to pick one, right? Close your eyes, put one in each hand, drop the one that's not important to you. Let's focus on the one that is. That's the way I would work. When I was coaching VJ, the first thing I told him, I said, you're not running a beast for another year. I don't care what they tell you, how much pressure you get from Spartan, you're on the pro team. You're not doing a beast. You're going to live in your wheelhouse where your strengths are. We're going to focus on those events, and we're not going to race both days. If we raced both days on a weekend, it was because he didn't make money on the first day. So if you missed the podium and you missed a paycheck on Saturday, okay, let's go back Sunday, make a couple bucks, right? Because it's usually, it was some mistake, some error that he made. He could make it up the following day and get paid because he needed the money. I mean, as an athlete, when you're starving athlete, you're suffering. You can't afford not to get paid when you go to these events. So, but commonly, I would not have my athletes, if I could help it, I wouldn't have them race more than I felt that was reasonable for them to succeed. We're not going to do it just to do it because you want to hang around with your buddies. There might be coaches that do that. I don't do that. I'm looking for guys that are trying to win or trying to excel. Let's just say that, excel. Not just show up and walk the course with your friend because you just want to be there. You don't need me for that. But anyway, that's the dilemma I see with these sports now. It's crowded. Sorry, I'm choking here. Got excited. But I wanted to talk about your thoughts on hybrid. To me, is when you're trying to be capable of doing all things, right? So you want to be able to have the strength and the power necessary to do the shorter, more intense event, but you also want to have the endurance to put together a really long effort. And this seems to be the holy grail these days. It's like people are trying to prove, either to themselves or to others, that they can participate in those high intensity, heavy lifting type events and then turn around and run an ultra like Kevin was saying. And I don't even know whether that makes sense. I mean, what's your thought?
Well, it's hard when you have athletes like Chris who can. So they win High Rocks World Championships and then turn around and then can place in a series race. So I think people think that that's like the pinnacle of fitness. And like, well, I don't disagree. Like, Chris is an amazing athlete, but she's also like genetically a freak or something. Like, that's not natural. Like, if you look at any other sport, like, you don't see some guy running the 800 running the 10K. Even though it's the same sport, you're like, oh, it's running. Like, no, they run a specific event and they train for that specific event to get the best result possible. So I have no doubt that if Chris trained for one specific thing, she would not get beat ever, because she has some amazing genetics. She works really hard, but like, I would say if there's only one weakness she has, is that she likes to do too much. Like, she came into DECA Worlds after World's Toughest Mudder. She still placed 6th I think, sixth or seventh, which is pretty incredible after running 100 miles with obstacles. But if she would have came in fresh, I mean, who knows what she would have done. So,
Well, I invited, I don't know if you know this, but I invited her to come see me, and I ran a battery test on her. And her aerobic capacity, even though it wasn't huge, it was incredibly robust. And what I'm suggesting is that she didn't have a real big VO2 score, but I could not make her go anaerobic in a test. And it didn't matter what I tested her on, and I tested her on a treadmill, I tested her on a rower, and I tested her on a skier. Clinical evaluations of her metabolism on all three of those events. And I took her out for a run afterwards where I tracked her on my bike for a 10K, and I forced her to follow the pace that I prescribed. I beat her up pretty good, to be honest with you. And I was impressed that I was able to make her lay on her back and waller around on the ground, because I don't think she's ever done that. And she told me, she goes, I never do this. I said, well, that's why I did it. I said, if you want to live in that high intensity environment, you got to start visiting the pain cave. And she doesn't have a pain cave. She has a sustainable ability to outwork most anybody in almost anything in the sport. And it's not like this real high-end ability. It's just this sticking power where you'll start to break and she'll still be pretty fresh. That's the bonus that she carries around with her. And you're right, it's a genetic predisposition. There's nothing about her training that you think, oh wow, the training is just so, incredible that she's got it dialed in. It's not that at all. She's just throwing herself out there and smiling all the way through it, and it's just happy Chris, just oh yeah, I'm going to run 100 miles today, and by the way, I'll get in the car and during the night we'll drive to this Spartan whatever the hell and do that.
Eat like one granola bar, and like I know when we were at Grit Games, like I don't know how she does it. Like if I don't eat appropriately and sleep appropriately, like everything has to be like perfect, or my body's like, nah, we're not doing it today. But she's like, oh yeah, it's like 3:00 and I've had like a granola bar, and we just did like the last man standing event, and she's just like bebopping along.
I'll tell you what though, she's an eater. She throws down the feedback. When she was staying here with me, we couldn't carry on a conversation with something not in her mouth. She was constantly eating. And I get it. I mean, you're burning a tremendous amount of energy being in that mindset in that body. But as you suggested, I mean, Chris aside, there are not too many people in the world that are going to excel on polar opposite ends of the spectrum. Usain Bolt's not about to do a mountain run for 14 miles, right? He's just not genetically predisposed to have that capacity.
Also, he just would, because it doesn't align with his goals or his training. He could get hurt. Like I had talked to somebody about the rally in the valley. I was like, why would I do that? What if I turn my ankle? Or like, I'm going to go paddle boarding. I don't paddle board. Like, so it's too far out of my scope to be like, if I hurt myself doing something like this, I'd feel really stupid.
Well, yeah. So what I've learned is people tend to do what their bodies are capable of doing. People that lift heavy weights is because their body likes to lift heavy weights. People that run long and fast and whatever, it's because their body likes that kind of activity. That's why I was talking about trying to put a square peg in a round hole. It's not likely. I mean, I've always, back in my day when I was athletic, I've always been a big guy. I mean, I've always been in that 200-pound range. I think at the peak endurance position for me, probably about 190. It was fighting weight for me, it's about 190 pounds. But if I looked at a weight, I gained weight. I mean, if I looked at a barbell, I would pick up 5 pounds. I didn't have to lift. I tried to avoid lifting a lot of weights because I couldn't wear clothes. I mean, literally, I just got too broad, and it just happened overnight. So I was always fighting that. I didn't want to be that big animal. I wanted to be leaner. I wanted to be lighter. So that's what caused me to take up running. Was I just wanted to try to get into a sport that would allow me not to be so huge. I mean, huge by standards, my own standards, but it still was a square peg in a round hole. I mean, when I ran marathons or did triathlons, I was still big. I mean, I was still big, too big for the sport, really. And I wasn't fast enough to run the 100. So I don't know. I guess I was stuck. But Kevin, do you still find yourself wanting to do like a Spartan beast or something like that?
I miss all the long stuff because I feel like it's a totally different mindset when you're competing. Like when you're going out for an ultra, you're not in the pain cave where your lungs are bleeding and everything. You're chatting along and you're moving and you have different demons, but it's different. Like I think gearing up for an ultra for me mentally is not as hard as gearing up for something short and fast. Like even a 5K time trial, like if I'm trying to go faster in aerobic, I'm like, oh, this is going to hurt a lot. And I hope I break 20. So it's not like I'm like putting up a crazy fast time, but that pain and effort is going to be greater in my head than going out for an ultra. And I've even like paced Jess, my wife, in a 12-hour ultra and realized after the fact I ran 40 miles. I'm like, oh, I don't even feel like I did much today, but I guess 40 miles is like, it's a pretty good day. It wasn't super fast, but so I do miss that stuff, but I guess I've kind of tried to hold myself back from doing that because like Tara said, like last year I just dabbled. I tried to do a couple Spartans here and there because I miss it. And I rolled my ankle really bad the week before the fit in New Jersey. So I showed up to the fit with a grapefruit ankle and unsmartly toughed it out and raced. And I mean, you know, still got that boneheaded mentality, but not that I don't run out like I'm afraid to get hurt, but I do understand there's a degree of like, if I want to compete for a world championship in December, I need to not show up with battle scars from things that are outside that scope because, you know, as Chris is, Rylan is for the men. And it's like, all right, well, if he's going to come and beat up, then maybe I can beat him because he's a little more run down today than he would be if he didn't go to 4 different countries in the last 4 weeks to race various races. So I won the co-ed relay last year, but I feel like I underperformed in the strong and not based on fitness, but things out of my control. But yeah, I don't have that grand face of the sport yet. So like, but I think I'm capable of being on a podium for strong and for sure and competing for the top time. So what's going to get me there? Not running ultras and beasts and
specificity.
Kind of stuff, so yeah, but more running will help me in the mile and the fit. And even if it's the fit age group competition at Worlds, it's still going to take some running to compete for that title. So.
Well, you're not going to run the fit if you're in 8. Why would you run the fit if you're going to have the mile and the strong, your main events after?
Tara, that's my pickle because I want to do everything, but at least I'm not doing ultras anymore. I don't know if that's like a compromise with myself, but
that's not a pickle. Like it's like one run that you could compete for like the world title, and you're going to go tire yourself out running an age group race.
But the alternative, I feel like I get stale if I'm just sitting around not doing anything for 2 days.
So
I don't know.
Let me ask you, since you invoke the term world.
Yeah, I know. That's just what they call it.
Yeah. I mean, and let's just say, for example, you win. What's the payday on a competition like that?
Tara knows. She won twice last year.
3,000
per event, and they pay out top 5.
Well, I don't care about the other 4 people. I'm talking about if you win, you get $3,000, right? Per event.
That's last year, yeah.
So next year it's going to be more?
I think it's similar, but they're paying out relay teams this year too.
They're paying out relay teams?
Yep.
No, I can't.
Maybe that's all I'll focus on. I'll just do relay teams.
Yeah. But relay teams same day. Like the strong relay is on the same day. So you'd have to race twice.
Oh, perfect. That comes back to my ultra endurance.
So I think that the thing for me that I look for in these sports across the board is the payday, right? If you're going to live the life as a professional athlete, the term professional athlete suggests that your primary source of income is the competitions and your endorsements. You can't have that other job, that 40-hour job, and then that's how you pay the rent, and then call yourself a pro athlete when you don't make $1,500 a year off your competition.
And that means like nobody's really a professional hybrid athlete except like Lauren and Hunter. There's not a lot for it to be actually a professional, because even if you win world championships for high rocks, you have to run all these races that don't pay out money. So you're traveling to all these places and incurring all these expenses. So yeah, if you go to world championships and you win 19,000, which she probably wins more from like sponsor bonuses and stuff like that. But if you were just thinking about that, you've probably spent at least like 5 or 6K traveling to all the other races you had to race before you actually raced that race.
Hunter told me that now this, mind you, this is post-COVID, so things weren't great, but he won everything he did, and he earned 30 grand for the year. And
yeah, I mean,
he doesn't.
Not a lot.
He doesn't have another job.
But he has sponsors and stuff too. That's probably some winnings only.
Well, I'm telling you, I know. And so he was complaining that it didn't make sense for him to do high rocks because there was no money in it, especially as you suggested with the travel and whatever. I think at World Championships this last go around, I think he told me he spent a couple $1,000s on beer for people after he won. But so I watched. You probably aren't into it. Excuse me, I got a dry cough here in this silly state of Tennessee. I watched the soccer tournament that went off in Nashville. Did you watch it last week?
Would you watch the Messi Nashville versus Miami final?
Yeah. Did you know that the seats down on the pitch were going out for 10 grand? The nosebleed seats were $450, and there was 35,000 people in that stadium.
Yeah. A lot more competitive to be a professional soccer player than it is to be a professional hybrid racer. That's the thing, like, yeah, there's going to be so many people, like the pool to be the top is so much lower than even if you look at CrossFit, which could directly correlate more to hybrid. Like, yeah, there are, some people that are making a living off of it, but the percentage, like maybe if you're the top one hybrid athlete, maybe that'd be like being the top 300 CrossFit athlete, and what are they making? Nothing.
Well, CrossFit athletes if you're a top 10 CrossFit athlete, if you go to the games and you show up top 10 between your sponsors and what have you, you're looking at probably easy $500,000 a year.
Oh yeah, but those guys like top 10, their competition is so much higher than hybrid. That's what I'm saying. Like if you're like number 2 in hybrid, maybe that would correlate to like the top 500 in CrossFit.
But my point is that the money is what created the professionalism. Without the money, you don't get the pros. So they have to be in the higher echelon athletes have to be enticed, and they're not going to show up to something that's not going to make them any money, and that's why.
Australia.
I'm sorry.
Ricky Gerard raced Australia.
Well, yeah, but he didn't need the money. he already has been doing well as a CrossFit athlete, right?
So, but what is like when CrossFit first started in like 2006, like payouts then? I don't imagine they were like anything they're close to now.
No, I know, but here's my point. My point is that for the thing to really take off, for the thing to really get the type of gravity it needs, somebody's got to bust out a wallet and just damn the torpedoes and throw some serious money at it. And then you're going to watch these athletes come out of the woodwork, and then you're going to watch the media want to cover it. That's how it grows. The problem is these guys that are putting on these events are pocketing the money they're making, and they're not wanting to share it. They're not giving enough. If they put $100,000 on first place in the next High Rocks World Championships, I guarantee you the media will be all over it, and by the next year, you'll see a lot more people will be aware of what that sport is. If I walk down my street and ask anybody on my street what High Rocks is, I don't think anybody will know, or DecaFit for that matter, or even OCR for that matter. They don't
Just
know.
those weird people running around their neighborhood. Would you chase them on a bike?
Yeah. They know I'm doing something weird. They don't know what it is, but they. So I don't know. I just think that I'm a fan of the athlete. I don't care what sport you're in. I'm a fan of the athlete. I want to see the athlete get paid for the work they're doing. I want them to be able to set records that astound the world. Legitimately. I said legitimately because I'm thinking about Khashoggi, breaking the 2-hour marathon.
Oh.
Yeah, not really. I mean,
that's not an official world record, though.
That's my point. That's my point.
That the human body is like capable. I think once somebody finally does break it, I mean, he's gotten pretty close. That then, just like when they broke the 4-minute mile, like now hundreds of people have probably broken the 4-minute mile, like tens of high school athletes.
I was just going to say high school athletes are doing it.
I think there's maybe like 8 to 10 high school athletes that have broken the 4-minute mile. So like we're always pushing like the level of like human performance. So I think like him completing that just shows that in the future it's possible. I mean, you can talk about too like shoes and stuff, like how much different are shoes 30 years ago if you're comparing a marathon world record to today. Are they really even comparable with the carbon fiber?
The shoes have. Let me just tell you, look, he's laughing. He knows where I'm going. This whole thing with the shoes. I promise you, I actually did a podcast about this about Khashoggi setting that 2-hour effort. If they said we'll give you $10 million if you can break the 2-hour marathon barefoot, he'd have took that bet in a heartbeat, and I bet you he could have done it. I think the shoe has had nothing to do with his success. I think everything that led him up to it helped.
I'm not talking about his success. I'm just talking about running in general. Like you saw.
I am too.
Yeah. You don't think that should have any kind of impact?
Absolutely do. Actually, if anything, it's a deterrent. This whole concept of putting a carbon shank layered between foam is not improving your ground reaction time or your potential to produce speed. It does not do it. It's a marketing gimmick. They got people bought into it. They put Khashoggi in the shoes. Everybody gets excited and assuming that the shoes are the wonderkin. I don't think so. I'll put you if you run correctly, if you learn to run correctly, you get into a shoe that is just enough to protect your foot and does not get in your way, and your body will perform optimally. I could prove that to you. I trust me. This is what I do all day long, every day for the past 30 years. I could bring it up right now. Reaction time and the response time of the foot relative to the afferent feedback that comes from the ground, how your central nervous system adapts to that contact point, and where your position is when you make contact with the earth matters. These guys that are overstriding, heel striking, not caring where they hit the ground because they're depending on that shoe to protect them, that's a hellbound train. There's so much more that you could get out of your body if you just allowed your body to do. You look back in time in track and field. I know I'm going to screw up the guy's name. Edwin Moses. Edwin Moses never lost a race running the 300 hurdles or 400 hurdles, 200 hurdles. Anything with a hurdle in it that he ran, he never got beat in his history of being in the athletics. He counted the distance of every step he took and how far above the actual hurdle he needed to be to optimize his performance. when nobody was using a computer to generate this information, he had one of those little Apple duty bobs. I forgot what they call those things. You know, where you put the little disc in the front, and he would map out every step that he took. He had it down to a science. I mean, literally to a science. And he was infallible because he focused so much on the way he was hit. You could, if you go back and look at Jesse Owens. Jesse Owens used to get onto a track that was with the cinder track and a trowel, and dig a little pivot out of the gravel to stick his little leather shoe in, and his times were not that far off from the records that exist today. With all the fangled science and crap that we've done, same thing with triathlon. The winning times on the Ironman are not that much different than they were 20 years ago. Look at the technology that went into the bikes and the shoes and the circumstance between then and now. I was at the Ironman World Championships on Kona in 1981. And Dave Scott was the world champion at that point in time. He had, I have a picture of his bike somewhere, in a wooden rack. They had wooden racks to put the bikes in. And these guys, they had a little Timex watch on, no heart rate monitor. You know, there was no such thing as sports drinks back then. He had like boiled potatoes in a little plastic bag tied to his top tube. I mean, there was no technology. And they toe cages instead of being clipped in. Helmets were made of leather. There was zero wool shorts. There was no technology back then, and their times were not that. Mark Allen, look at a 2:40 marathon back then in an Ironman. You know, 8-hour event, right, at Kona. Today, it's not that much different. There might be minutes difference between then and now. And look at the technology that's gone into all the devices then.
Didn't they just crush the last one in like 7:48? Like they set three guys broke 8 hours on the same course.
Yeah, but my point is that over the course of, we're talking 30, 40 years, 40 years of technology. Listen, I'm into triathlon. I'm a bike fitter. I've raced a bunch of triathlon myself. The difference in the aero wheels that you can own today and the technology that goes into the bike, that's the longest event. If you want to put down a 4.5 hour time trial on that bike for 112 miles, you know, you've got to really start paying attention to the details. Those guys were doing it back then. I mean, not that fun. If the significant difference in time is probably on the bike right now compared to the runs. The run times aren't that much different. It comes down to the body in space, where you're putting the body in space. It also has to do with, as Kevin knows I've been dealing with these days, is your capacity to process heat. If you overheat, you're screwed. You got to know how to keep that body cool, because when it goes to 104 degrees, you're cooked.
So what did you think? You were in Chicago, right? What did you think about Michaela running in like double long sleeves indoors? How'd she not get hot?
I don't know what to tell you.
Did you see her, Kevin? She like running indoors in Chicago.
What time was that heat?
I don't know.
Because I was gone by noon. I might not even see it.
It was in the Elite 15 heat. I mean, but
I saw the men race.
Long sleeves, like black long sleeves. I'm like running in no clothes, and I'm like sweating my ass off, just like drenched. I'm like, how's she not sweating? Like, it's very weird.
Well, so I've been spending a lot of time as Kevin knows, and he's been a guinea pig for me, looking at ways to mitigate heat production, understanding what it is and what to do about it. And it's a big deal. The two things, there's three things, and I don't care, especially if you're a hybrid athlete. There's three things that you're battling. One is your skill sets, the ability to do things correctly. And that includes having good mechanics with your run. Clearly, it matters that you can navigate through the Concept 2 devices and the strength and whatever with good skill. Minimize the cost of work. How you contend with lactate. The production of lactate, when that gun goes off, everybody goes off like a scalded dog. And if you looked at their heart rates 3 minutes in from what it was when they started, they're already on a hellbound train. This is a matter of time before they burn up, right? That's common. So the guys that don't burn up are the guys that win. Most of the guys end up, and I'm just saying guys, I don't mean men, just people in general. You get about midway through that event, if your lactate production is unchecked and you're not able to do something or haven't done something in your training to have a better handle on that lactate production, the 1-2 punch is that your body's overheating and the lactate production is going to take you out. Collectively, those two things will get you. Your skills are going to help to minimize the amount of heat and minimize the amount of lactate or deal with the lactate more effectively than you're producing. You never hear anybody talk about those things. They'll tell you they're doing base training. Oh, I'm putting a lot of base training in so I can improve my anaerobic threshold. That ain't it. That's not it. In a high rocks event or event that's high intensity for an hour, no, that base training ain't going to help you. You're not going to stay aerobic. You're not going to be listen. I did this with a gaggle of guys the other day. When I had Colin Stifer was here and some other guys were here. I mimicked the event. I put them all in the street, put monitors on them all, put a body core temperature meter on one of them, and I said, go. And I chased them down with my electric bike so I could monitor their heart rate and see where their heart rate was relative to the distance we were traveling, and then took them back in and then put them on a VO2 max test after I ran them. And one of them a couple of them I put them in plastic suits to exacerbate the heat. He's laughing.
It exacerbated.
But so the point is that I wanted to identify what the outcome is and what the enemy is going to be and how soon it shows its ugly head, right? And I promise you that what I've found, me again, the fly on the wall, nobody's talking about how to mitigate that heat production, how to prepare for it, how to get into a better place when it comes about. Because if your core temperature gets over 102, you're on your way down. You have already sacrificed 10% of your performance. You're already in that bad place. If it gets to 104, they're going to call a medevac to get you out of there. You're in deep trouble. And you can get there if it's indoor, humid enough, and you go hard enough. Look at Miami. Miami would have been a perfect storm. You know?
Or Puerto Rico for DecaFit, right, Tara? I got experience in both of those.
But there's a way to prepare. There's a way to prepare for it, and you never hear people talking about it. And the other consideration is what you're doing to make friends with that lactate production. Nobody talks about that. They always talk about, oh yeah, I'm going to put in 10 weeks of base training, low intensity stuff to improve my threshold. Well, you're going to get really good at being aerobic, but you're going to sacrifice your biomechanics in the way you run, so you can't go fast. And you're still, when your heart rate bumps up over your threshold and that lactate production starts to come up, it's still going to take you out. There's just no saving you in an hour. There's just not. I mean, if you're running a marathon, I get it. But if you're running a high-intensity event in an hour, you better get a handle on that, because otherwise it's going to – and I've seen it time and time and time again. You see these guys that talk about it in interviews. Yeah, by the time I got to XYZ, I was so hot and, my legs were burning up and and their performance is dumped. By the time they get to the wall ball, they're cooked. You watch it happen. I mean, I know you've probably felt it. You get there and your legs are cooked. You're just, the idea of going unbroken after doing 8 kilometers worth of running hard and those other events.
But the standard now for women, all freaking going broken. I was like pumped to get like two sets of 30. Like, yeah, I'm doing something. But
you understand what I'm saying, right? It's the things that we don't discuss, you don't hear people talk about, is what do I do about this heat? Because I'm going to get hot. And so getting in a sauna is not the answer, by the way. People that are trying to acclimate to heat by getting in hot environments and, oh yeah, well I live in, Miami, so it's always hot, so I run outside, it's really hot. That's not the same thing as a physiological adaptation to the heat. That's not the same thing. There's a very specific path to correct that problem. And I found it, I've been messing with it, and now I'm starting to see some of the top athletes in the world are doing the same thing. Actually, I should restate that. I saw the top athletes in the world doing it, got my attention, started focusing on it, and now I see where this needs to go. By the way, do you know Kylian Jornet just showed himself wearing one of the core devices?
Wow.
Yeah. So, and the guy that just won the Western States 100, also on top of the heat thing. The guys in Norway that won the Ironman, also dealing with these heat block training sessions. It's a big deal. It's novel. Not too many people understand it. Not too many people are dealing in it. But the two things, if you can get a handle on the production of lactate, and getting a handle doesn't mean just move your threshold. It means getting better at transporting that toxic and acidity out of the muscles quickly. And that's a function of training as well. Hunter's a good example of that. I've tested him over the years, 7, 8 times. And I've seen where his body's adapted to this acidic environment more effectively than his competition. He can go hard, be lit up with lactate and be fine. Where most other guys, when they get lit up like that, game over. They're done. They lose 25% of their performance by the time they get to the last episodes of the event. You see it happen all the time. They get crushed.
Mm-hmm.
Put together a nice 5 or 6 efforts, and then they're scrambling after that, wallowing around on the deck after it's done. Same thing with CrossFit. Same thing. But those are the ingredients that I've been delving in that I don't hear people talk about. They're always talking about the new shoe, the amount of running they did, the workouts they're doing, just work. They're not talking about taking a step back and looking at what they're doing that needs to change in order to get them to a better place. And because I've been the fly on the wall for the past 30 years looking at athletes' performance, it's what I do. I mean, I'm not about to go running with people in the street and profess my greatness on my 15-minute mile. But it's been a lot of fun for me to watch some of the science reveal what's missing and see the result when people finally identify and make the corrections they need to make. Anyway, I'm ranting now. I'm sorry. But.
Do you use a lot of VO2 stuff too, though, right?
I do a VO2. If I have, in a perfect world, I will do a VO2 max test on every athlete that I meet. If I'm going to
tri-team uses like that a lot, but it gets kind of expensive if you're like actually testing it like in your workouts. Because I've looked into that too.
Well, so I've tested all kinds of athletes, and I've done it a lot of different ways. What I've been doing lately is I'm trying to be specific to the sport. So right now, high rocks is the thing for me. So I want to see, aside from just seeing what your threshold looks like when you're running and what your mechanics look like when you're running, I want to see what the cost of work is when you're stressed. When, going into a lab fresh, preparing yourself to go into the lab fresh, getting on the treadmill with like about 5-minute warm up, and then having somebody put a mask on you and test you is not the same thing as me running your ass around the 95-degree heat in a plastic suit, keeping the plastic suit on you, and then putting you up on a treadmill and then testing you to see what your heart rate response is when you're in that stress state. Because that's what's going to matter. What happens when they're shooting at you? It's like you go to the range and you can shoot at that little target all day long, and it's not going to shoot back, right? You got to get into the fight and see what kind of responses you get when you're taxed, and then use that information to determine what your training should look like. I do the same thing after I've tested somebody in a perfect world. If it's not a group setting, I will test them and then look at the data, share the data, decide how the training might look, and then take them out and then run them and then track the metrics while they're running, what the pace looks like relative to their threshold, and see whether it's valid, whether what you did on the treadmill is going to bear fruit when you get out on the road. And I've found on occasion where it didn't work. If, like, for example, let's say I find your threshold at 160 beats per minute, that should be sustainable, right? I take you out and run you at 160 beats per minute and you blow up in 30 seconds. You don't have the capacity. So then we have to rethink it. We have to adjust. So I said it earlier, and I'll say it again: trust but verify. I know the data is good, but I want to see what happens in the real world relative to that data to see whether we're really going to be on point with it. And that's another thing I don't see too many people do. When you get a VO2 test, you go to a university or something, and some student there puts you through some standard protocol test and hands you the sheet, and you have no idea what happens when you go home. You're looking at it, okay, he says my threshold, don't go over 140 beats per minute. That's your take-home information. Don't go over 140. No, it's not the way it works. We've got to look at it from a different perspective. So also the paradigm and the way people approach the training, segregating the work. I bet you $1 you didn't read my book. Somebody? Did you read? You read it. Okay, good.
Yeah, I read both of your books.
Good, thank you.
Including the second one a few times, because I'm like, I'm forgetting certain things. I need a reminder.
So think about this for a minute. I find this to be interesting. You talked about periodization, okay? And periodization training for an endurance athlete, low volume, volume builds over time, low intensity. You progressively increase the intensity, cut back on the volume, blah, 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 blah over time, right? So you're segregating. You're being very specific about an outcome in one direction, one timeline, and then move to the next timeline when you feel like you're ready. Well, physiologically, what happens is you start to trade adaptation. I became aerobic. I quit being aerobic because I'm doing anaerobic. My threshold falls back to where it was before, right? So that's what happens. I made the analogy, this is for you, Tara, because I know he's heard me say it before. The analogy I use is look at it like nutrition. There's 3 substrates you have to have. You need fat, you need protein, you need carbohydrate. So if you think of it in terms of energy out, expenditure, right? When you say, well, Monday is my fat day. I'm going to eat nothing but fat on Monday, nothing but carbohydrates on Tuesday, and nothing but protein on Wednesday. You segregate and you hope at the end of the week that your nutrition is on point. Well, that's the way we train. We're segregating the intensities. We're not inclusive. We're not like, I want to see guys flow. I want to see a guy get into the mojo. Things are cool aerobically. I'm feeling pretty good about myself. Make a move, punch it up, time to retire, bring it back down. And not fartlek, but throughout the course of the timeline that you're in your training, you're touching all aspects of your metabolism. So go ahead. You got a question?
When I say periodization, you can't always be trying to chase 2 rabbits, right? So if you're trying to increase your strength in an off season, it doesn't make sense to be doing a lot of cardio because you're going to take away, like, it's not that you do no cardio. Like, you still want to do like primary workouts to maintain your fitness through this strength phase, but you're not generally, if you're a trained athlete, it's very rare that you're probably going to make huge strength gains and huge like endurance gains at the same time. Like, it's like when I just went through a strength block, and now I'm moving back towards more of like DECA specific. I don't need as much strength anymore, but my strength plummets because I'm not doing as much. Like, but I don't need it. So I think I'll take time though to focus on, like, for high rocks, I need all that strength because it's my weakness. If I didn't take an adequate amount of time to develop the strength that I needed and scale back on my cardio, I don't think I would have gotten any stronger.
Well, so you said a couple things that resonate with me, and you just validated what I was saying. You put in the strength, you sacrifice the cardio. You put in the cardio, you sacrifice the strength. It's always a give and take. Unless you don't eliminate any elements of the needs from your training. So you may have times in your training where the intensity is greater. I'm using intensity as a broad stroke. And the duration in lower intensity work is also inclusive, because that's what your events are. Your specificity needs to, if you're going to train for a specific event, your training should look like that event all the time. You don't want to say, well, I'm going to build my run for the next 10 weeks, and then I'm going to back off that. Then I'm going to focus on my strength, because then you're going to just sacrifice all the work you did in your runs. And people are doing that. That's what they're doing. They're creating these blocks like you suggested, and they're separating the elements, and they're hoping that one day when it comes time, everything will be just enough, right? And I think that if you can do this effectively and still cover all the bases, and it sounds
like you like triathlon, like you do everything separately, like you run, swim, and bike, and then when you get closer to the event, you start meshing them together into blocks.
Do bricks. Well, that's but can I tell you something?
Yep.
That approach to training is age old. It's just like we go back to talking about Lydiard. Broader the base, the higher the peak. He was the one that kind of set the stage for all that concept of put that base training in first and move on. They're still talking about that. That guy has been gone since the 60s, right? We're looking at 80 years ago that this information was available to us, and we're still playing that game. I promise you, you could take an athlete, I've done it, you can take an athlete and keep them in it, have them do everything, and do it. How often do you do an event simulation? Every 2 weeks? Never?
None until 8 weeks out.
Oh wow! I have my guys do it every 2 weeks.
Even in the off season?
Absolutely, every 2 weeks.
I have a problem with mental burnout, so I think that's like I need to take a step away
completely
from doing all this race specific stuff, because it doesn't make me excited to race. So for me, mental and physical burnout are probably my biggest. I really don't get injured very easily, but like if my mind's not in it, then for me, I think taking that step back is helpful.
I'm absolutely with you on this. I'm suggesting, you said off season. I mistook. I'm suggesting that, by the way, in the sport anymore, there's no off season. That the event producers are putting events on the calendar every month of the year, right? Yeah. It's like they're almost engaging you to race all the time.
But the top athletes choose to race what races they're going to race.
Right. Absolutely.
So you have the opportunity, but if you're a good athlete, probably
and if you have a coach, he's not letting you do it. If a coach has any brains, he's not going to let you do it. You're going to have some B races. They're going to be short. I train and coach Ironman athletes. I get it. You definitely need to take some time for yourself. If you're starting to break down, you need, and this is the hardest thing in the world to get an athlete to do these days, is get them to stop. Go on vacation. Go lay on a beach someplace. Go for a nice casual run because you enjoy it. ride a bicycle, play. The big thing now is pickleball. Go play pickleball, for anything else. No question about it. But I'm saying that when you're training for an event, 8 months out of the year, I will have them do a sim every second week. And the reason is we're testing to see whether the training is working. Is what we did for the past 2 weeks helping or hurting? Are you getting stronger, getting weaker? Where are the holes in the program? What do we need to focus on? I make decisions about what to do the next week based on what occurred in the sim and the conversation and the data that we're looking at. And by the way, when you get to the race should be the easy part. The training is what's going to get you, right? Anyway, the broad stroke point I was trying to make is that rather than segregate your processes, be inclusive with your processes. There's going to be times when the thing that you're going to be intense with is not going to be as intense. And the things that we're going to be, more furious, they're not going to be so furious, but they're always there. So you're expanding and contracting in the process that you're training for. You cause your body to become capable of it regardless of what's in front of you. And because it just becomes who you are. You're just really good at what you're doing. Not really good at just running, not really good at doing a wall ball, but collectively you can do it all. Hunter trains like that commonly, but he's been doing crazy crap lately, and it's a whole other thing.
I feel like this sport is also just like made for Hunter. Like if you could make an athlete, it would be Hunter.
My sentiment exactly. You know what? It's like, so when he was in the endurance world, I shared this information with Kevin when he came to see me. I could show you tests I did on Hunter when he was doing Spartan. His endurance capacity was through the roof. His VO2 score was high. He was still a 200-pound athlete, but he was very, very built for that endurance. When he went to CrossFit, things changed. His muscle structure and function changed. His physiology changed. His test results changed. I tested him right after he won the High Rocks World Championships the first time, right after that, and his numbers looked terrible. His threshold went from 160 to 135 beats per minute. His VO2 score dropped probably, I want to say 15 points. But he said, I've never been as fit as I am right now. I said, don't stop doing what you're doing. It's working. Because he raced, so his threshold, I don't know, this is kind of shabby to use him as a guinea pig right now, but his threshold was at 135 beats per minute. He's racing at 165 beats per minute.
35 is like.
That's my point. Why do you think that is? Because the density of his muscles have changed. Because of all the high intensity lifting he's doing, his fast twitch fibers are proliferating. He's squeezing down on all those slow twitch fibers. And those fast twitch fibers have a very unique metabolic transporter that resides in fast twitch fiber that do not reside in slow twitch fibers that move lactate out of the working muscle in seconds. In seconds. And when you get to a place where that can happen, that's where the magic starts to happen. For him, it was kismet. It just he just fell into it. He didn't do it by design. It just was happening. And I'm the one that showed him. I said, look, this is why this is happening. And this is why you're able to do what you're doing. Don't stop doing what you're doing. It's working. But see, the interesting thing about it is very few people are able to see those things because they're not looking at them. They're not looking at the information clinically. They're not getting a chance to get behind the curtain and see what's physically going on inside that person's body and the outcome relative to what they're doing. That's what's missing. And that's my world. That's what I do. But so to me, the argument is, if you can afford to travel all over the country and the world to get to an event and not produce much more than you did at the last event, you just wasted a lot of money. You might have had a good time with the event. You may have had fun with your friends. It's like a vacation. Okay. But if you're trying to win, if you invested a little bit of money in you, physically in you, to find out what needs to change and how to go about making those changes, that's huge. And this is what people don't do. They do it in professional sport, because in professional sport, there's enough money to serve these athletes, that intellect. It just doesn't exist in these, low-hanging fruit sports. It doesn't exist.
And then the discipline to take some time back and make those changes. I know for me, I've slotted in a clinic between races, and I'm like, all right, cool, I'm going to do this. But I'm like, oh, wait, I got to gear up for this race. And then the next week's this race. And before you know it, it's been a month, like, oh, I haven't put into place everything I just learned. Why? And then by that time, the excitement's gone and you kind of forgot half of it. And if you're not putting it into place, then it kind of defeats the purpose of even learning all of it, because you're not applying it. So,
yeah. Well, I mean,
no off season.
Absolutely.
Really
so kind
stage.
of a closing commentary. It's like, we're talking about this and I can't help but share it. I have a client I'm working with right now. I told this to Kevin when he was here recently, I would almost bet money he's going to win the world's toughest mudder. Nobody knows him.
I do. I won't say his name now.
Yeah. And he's come to see me 4 times over the last year. We got initial information on him at a clinic I did in Jacksonville. Looked interesting, nothing crazy. He's not real outspoken, not a big talker. Made an appointment to see me 2 months later. Showed up in Tennessee, put in some more work, worked on his mechanics, gave him some fresh information about his training. Showed up another couple months later, got on it again, and right behind every one of these visits, he was winning races. He's winning long races. He's winning Ultra Beasts. Every event that he towed the line, he had won, with one exception. He just did a 100-miler in the mountains in Montana. He didn't intend to try to win it. He came in 15th place out of a couple hundred, with elevation gain to over 10,000 feet down to 4,000 feet and back up and down on a single track trail. But I told him, I said, this is the heart rate I want you to race at, based on what we're seeing, based on all this information, and he nails it. He stays right on that heart rate. His energy levels are good. His pace is better than it's ever been. His energy levels post-race are good. And he's just like, I couldn't believe after a 100-miler through a crazy mountain race like he did, the very next day he's like, I feel pretty good. I feel pretty good. He realized the value of getting this information and going through the processes, and it's paying off like crazy right now.
I take 2 weeks after a big race.
I don't blame you. And you know what? Your body's probably better for it. All right, guys. Look, thanks for doing this with me. I warned you that it would be like no agenda, just off the rails. And hopefully some people will see this and say, well, I don't know, maybe I'll put up with it one more time and watch the next one. And I don't know what the next one's going to be. Watch this. Boom. Watch it.
Ooh, I like it. Catch the eye.
Skills, right?
Yeah.
When the body dies, the brain flourishes. It's not easy being me, I promise you. All right, guys. Listen, thank you so much, Tara. It was a pleasure meeting you finally, virtually.
Yep.
Kevin, always a slice. Say hello to your lovely wife. I will catch up with you guys down the road.
Thanks, Richard.
Take
Bye,
care.
Tara.
Yep.
See you soon.